In the frost-laden winter of 1847, beneath the grand arches of Thornwick Manor, a duke walked among commoners wearing borrowed clothes and a false name. He sought something no title could buy, a heart that would choose him for himself, alone. Yet when he finally revealed his true identity to the woman he had grown to love, she turned away without a word, leaving him standing in the snow. What he did not know was that she carried a secret far heavier than his own, a secret that would test the boundaries of forgiveness, class, and the very meaning of love. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you're listening to this story. I want to know how far it has traveled. The Duke of Ashford stood at the window of his London townhouse, watching the December rain streak the glass like tears he had never been permitted to shed. At 30 years of age, Sebastian Ashford possessed everything society deemed valuable. A dukedom stretching across 3 counties, a fortune that could purchase half of Mayfair, and a lineage traced back to the Conquest. Yet as he observed the lamplighters moving through the darkening streets below, he felt the familiar weight of his gilded cage pressing against his chest. "Your Grace, the Countess of Helmsley has sent another invitation," his secretary announced from the doorway, holding a cream-colored envelope sealed with crimson wax. "She wishes to introduce you to her niece at the Christmas ball." Sebastian did not turn from the window. "Decline it, Pemberton. Decline them all." It was the same ritual every season. Ambitious mothers paraded their daughters before him like prized horses at auction, their eyes calculating the value of his title rather than seeking the measure of his character. They curtsied with practiced grace, spoke of weather and music with rehearsed charm, and gazed at him with expressions that never quite reached their eyes. Not one had ever asked him what he thought, what he feared, what he dreamed of in the silent hours before dawn. His father, the late Duke, had arranged a marriage for him before his death 5 years prior, a union with Lady Beatrice Thornton, daughter of the Earl of Westmere. She was beautiful in the way of marble statues, cold and perfect, and she had made no secret of her satisfaction with the arrangement. "You are everything I require in a husband," she had told him during their first private conversation. "Wealthy, titled and sufficiently handsome. We shall do very well together." Indeed, he had broken the engagement 3 weeks later, enduring his father's fury and society's scandalized whispers. The old duke had died shortly after, some said of apoplexy brought on by his son's defiance. Sebastian carried that guilt like a stone in his pocket, smooth and heavy from constant handling. "There must be something more," he murmured to the rain-streaked glass. "Someone who would choose me if I were merely Sebastian, with nothing but my own merit to recommend me." Pemberton cleared his throat delicately. "Your Grace, if I may be so bold, you possess many qualities beyond your title. Any woman of sense would be fortunate to become a duchess," Sebastian interrupted, his voice edged with bitterness. "That is precisely the problem, Pemberton. I do not wish to be chosen for what I am. I wish to be chosen for who I am." The secretary retreated, leaving Sebastian alone with his reflection in the darkening window. The face that stared back at him was handsome enough, dark hair that fell across his forehead despite his valet's best efforts, grey eyes that his mother had once called stormy, a strong jaw that spoke of generations of aristocratic breeding. But what lay beneath that face? What manner of man existed beyond the title and the fortune? He had no idea. He had been raised to be a duke, trained from childhood to manage estates, navigate parliament, and maintain the dignity of his position. His education had been impeccable, his manners beyond reproach, his sense of duty unshakable. But his own desires, his own nature, these had never been considered worthy of exploration. An idea began to form in his mind, audacious and perhaps foolish, but compelling in its simplicity. What if he could step outside his gilded cage, just for a time? What if he could walk among ordinary people as an ordinary man, free from the weight of expectation and the glitter of his title? The following morning, Sebastian summoned Pemberton to his study. "I am going away for a time," he announced. "You will tell anyone who inquires that I have gone to inspect my estates in Northumberland." Pemberton's eyebrows rose fractionally. "And where will your grace actually be?" "In Yorkshire. There is a village called Thornwick, near my northern estate. I have never visited it, and no one there knows my face." Sebastian pulled a map from his desk drawer, spreading it across the mahogany surface. "I shall take rooms at the local inn under an assumed name. I wish to observe how ordinary people live, to understand their concerns and their joys. Your Grace, this is highly irregular. What if something should happen? What if you are recognized?" "I shall take care not to be recognized. I shall dress simply, speak plainly, and conduct myself as a gentleman of modest means might do." Sebastian's voice carried a note of determination that Pemberton had rarely heard. "I have made my decision, Pemberton. I require only your discretion and your assistance in maintaining the fiction of my absence." The secretary studied his employer's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Your Grace, though I pray you will not come to regret this adventure." 3 days later, Sebastian descended from a hired coach in the village square of Thornwick, dressed in clothes that would not have looked out of place on a country solicitor or a prosperous merchant. The coat was well made but not ostentatious, the boots sturdy rather than fashionable, the cravat simple and unadorned. He had left his signet ring in London, along with every other marker of his rank. The village was smaller than he had expected. A collection of stone cottages clustered around a Norman church, with a single inn bearing the sign of the White Hart. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the cobblestones with white and muffling the sounds of daily life. A blacksmith's hammer rang out from a nearby forge, and the scent of fresh bread drifted from a baker's shop. "Can I help you, sir?" The innkeeper was a stout man with a weathered face and shrewd eyes that assessed Sebastian with professional interest. "I am seeking rooms for an extended stay," Sebastian replied, careful to moderate his accent to something less aristocratic. "My name is Sebastian Thorn. I am a scholar, researching the history of the northern counties." "A scholar, eh?" The innkeeper's expression warmed slightly. "We don't get many of your sort here in winter. Most visitors come in summer for the walking, but I've a good room available, with a fire and a view of the square. Will that suit?" "Admirably." As Sebastian signed the register with his false name, he felt a peculiar lightness in his chest, as though he had set down a burden he had carried for so long that he had forgotten its weight. Here, in this small village where no one knew him, he was simply Mr. Thorn, a man of no particular consequence, free to discover who he might be when stripped of all the trappings of his birth. He did not yet know that his freedom would last exactly 3 weeks, or that it would end in a rejection more painful than any he had endured in London's glittering ballrooms. He did not know that the woman who would change everything was at that very moment walking through the snow toward the village school, her worn cloak pulled tight against the wind, her thoughts occupied with the children in her care rather than with dukes or destiny. All he knew as he climbed the narrow stairs to his room at the White Hart was that for the first time in his adult life, he felt the possibility of hope. The village school stood at the edge of Thornwick, a modest stone building with frost-etched windows and a chimney that struggled to produce enough smoke to warm the single classroom within. Sebastian had discovered it on his 3rd day in the village, drawn by the sound of children's voices reciting their letters in unison. He had taken to walking past the school each morning, ostensibly to explore the countryside, but in truth because he had glimpsed the schoolmistress through the window, and something about her had arrested his attention. She was not beautiful in the conventional sense. Her features were too strong, her frame too slender, her dress too plain. But there was a quality to her movements, a grace and purpose that spoke of inner strength. "That's Miss Eleanor Hartley," the innkeeper's wife had told him when he inquired. "She's been our schoolmistress these past 4 years. came from somewhere down south, though she never speaks of it. A fine teacher and kind to the children, though some of the village ladies think she's too educated for her own good. Sebastian had made it his business to learn more. Eleanor Hartley was 26 years old, the daughter of a country vicar who had died, leaving her with nothing but a modest education and the necessity of earning her own living. She had taken the position in Thornwick because it offered a cottage of her own and a salary sufficient for her needs, though barely so. She spent her evenings tutoring the children of local farmers who wished their sons to learn more than basic reading, and her Sundays visiting the sick and elderly. She was, in short, everything the women of his acquaintance were not: self-sufficient, purposeful, and utterly indifferent to social advancement. Sebastian had contrived an introduction by offering to donate books to the school library, presenting himself as Mr. Thorne, a scholar with an interest in rural education. Eleanor had accepted his offer with cautious gratitude, her grey-green eyes studying him with an intelligence that made him feel transparent. "You are generous, Mr. Thorne," she had said, her voice low and melodious, "but I must ask what you hope to gain from this generosity. In my experience, gentlemen rarely give without expecting something in return." He had been taken aback by her directness. "I expect nothing, Miss Hartley, save the satisfaction of knowing that children will have access to knowledge that might otherwise be denied them." She had regarded him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then I accept your gift, sir, and thank you for it." Over the following weeks, Sebastian had found excuses to visit the school, to linger in conversation with Eleanor, to offer assistance with repairs to the building or supplies for the children. She had accepted his help with the same cautious gratitude, never quite lowering her guard, never quite trusting his motives. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, something had shifted between them. Their conversations had grown longer, ranging from education to literature to philosophy. He had discovered that she read voraciously, borrowing books from the vicar's library and treasuring each volume as though it were made of gold. She had a quick mind and a sharp wit, and she challenged his opinions with a fearlessness that both frustrated and delighted him. He had fallen in love with her without quite realizing it, the way one might fall asleep, gradually, then all at once. The crisis came on a bitter January afternoon, when the village gathered in the church hall for the annual winter assembly. It was a modest affair compared to London's grand balls, but the villagers approached it with enthusiasm, decorating the hall with evergreen boughs and organizing tables laden with simple fare. Sebastian had escorted Eleanor to the assembly, a gesture that had raised eyebrows among the village matrons, but which Eleanor had accepted with her characteristic composure. She wore a dress of dark blue wool, simply cut but becoming, and she had allowed him to take her arm as they walked through the snow. "You have been very kind to me, Mr. Thorne," she said quietly as they approached the hall. "Kinder than I deserved, perhaps." "You deserve far more kindness than the world has shown you, Miss Hartley," he replied, and meant it with every fibre of his being. The assembly was in full swing when they arrived, the hall warm with bodies and bright with candlelight. The vicar's wife presided over the refreshment table, while the blacksmith tuned his fiddle for dancing. Children darted between the adults, their faces flushed with excitement. Sebastian had planned to tell Eleanor the truth that evening. He had rehearsed the words in his mind 100 times. "I am not who you think I am. My name is not Thorne, but Ashford, and I am a duke. I came here seeking something real, something true, and I found it in you. Will you forgive my deception?" But before he could speak, the door of the hall burst open, admitting a blast of cold air and a figure Sebastian recognized with sinking dread. Lady Beatrice Thornton stood in the doorway, resplendent in a travelling cloak of crimson velvet, trimmed with ermine, her golden hair arranged in elaborate curls beneath a fashionable bonnet. Behind her stood her brother, Lord Thornton, and their mother, the Countess of Westmere, both dressed with equal magnificence. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned toward the newcomers, then toward Sebastian, as Lady Beatrice's gaze found him across the room. "Your Grace," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. "How extraordinary to find you here, in such rustic surroundings. We have been searching for you these past weeks. Your secretary was most unhelpful, but we finally extracted your location from one of your grooms." Sebastian felt the blood drain from his face. Beside him, Eleanor had gone very still. "Your Grace," she repeated softly, her voice barely audible. Lady Beatrice swept across the hall, her skirts rustling importantly, her smile sharp as a blade. "Did you not tell these good people who you are, Sebastian? How very democratic of you. Allow me to enlighten them." She turned to address the assembled villagers, her voice dripping with condescension. "You have been entertaining the Duke of Ashford, one of the wealthiest and most powerful peers in England. I do hope he has not been too bored by your provincial company." Sebastian found his voice at last. "Beatrice, you have no right." "No right." Her laughter was brittle and cold. "I have every right, Your Grace. Or have you forgotten that we were engaged to be married? That you humiliated me and my family by breaking that engagement without cause?" She turned her attention to Eleanor, her eyes raking over the simple blue dress with undisguised contempt. "And who is this creature? Surely you have not been amusing yourself with the local schoolmistress. How deliciously scandalous." Eleanor's face had gone white, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Mr. Thorne." She stopped, corrected herself. "Your Grace, is what this lady says true? Are you indeed the Duke of Ashford?" Sebastian reached for her hand, but she stepped back, her expression closing like a door. "Eleanor, please, let me explain." "There is nothing to explain," she said quietly. "You lied to me. You lied to everyone here. You came among us wearing a false name, playing at being ordinary, as though our lives were a game for your amusement. It was not like that. I sought only—" "What did you seek, Your Grace?" Her voice remained level, but he could hear the pain beneath it. "To see how the common people live, to find a woman so desperate for affection that she would overlook your deception, to prove that even a schoolmistress might be dazzled by a duke. Eleanor, I beg you, do not." She drew herself up, her dignity intact despite the tears that glistened in her eyes. "I am a schoolmistress, Your Grace, and I earn my living by my own labor. I have no fortune, no family, no prospects beyond what I can create for myself, but I have my integrity, and I will not surrender it for any man, regardless of his rank." She turned and walked toward the door, her back straight, her head high. The villagers parted to let her pass, their faces reflecting shock and sympathy in equal measure. Sebastian moved to follow her, but Lady Beatrice caught his arm. "Let her go, Sebastian. She is nothing to you. Come back to London where you belong, and we shall forget this unfortunate episode." He shook off her hand with more force than was strictly polite. "You understand nothing, Beatrice, nothing at all." He pushed through the crowd and out into the night, but Eleanor had vanished into the snow and darkness. He searched the village for hours, calling her name, but she did not answer. When he finally returned to the inn, cold and defeated, the innkeeper informed him that Miss Hartley had sent word to the school board that she was resigning her position, effective immediately. "She's left Thornwick, sir," the innkeeper said, his tone carefully neutral. "Or should I say, Your Grace, took the morning coach south and didn't say where she was bound." Sebastian climbed the stairs to his room, each step heavier than the last. He had come to Thornwick seeking authenticity, seeking a connection untainted by his title and fortune. Instead, he had found love, and lost it in the same moment, destroyed by the very deception he had employed to find it. He stood at the window, watching the snow fall on the empty square, and for the first time since childhood, Sebastian Ashford, Duke of Ashford, wept. Eleanor Hartley arrived in Bath 3 days after fleeing Thornwick, her small trunk containing everything she owned in the world, her heart feeling equally compact and portable. The city's elegant crescents and classical facades seemed to mock her with their grandeur, reminding her of the vast gulf between her world and that of the man she had known as Sebastian Thorne, the man who was, in truth, a duke. She had secured temporary lodging in a modest boarding house on the unfashionable edge of the city, paying for a week's accommodation with money she could ill afford to spend. Her references from Thornwick were useless now. She could hardly ask the school board to recommend her after abandoning her position without proper notice. She would need to find new employment quickly before her meager savings ran dry. But first, she needed to understand why she felt so utterly shattered. "You look as though you've lost your last friend in the world," observed a voice from the doorway of the boarding house's small parlor. Eleanor looked up from the newspaper she had been pretending to read, its columns of employment advertisements blurring before her tired eyes. The speaker was a woman of perhaps 50 years, dressed in a traveling costume of deep purple that spoke of both taste and independence. Her silver hair was arranged in a simple but elegant style, and her dark eyes sparkled with intelligence and humor. "Forgive me," Eleanor said, attempting to compose herself. "I did not mean to appear so melancholy." "Nonsense. Melancholy is a perfectly reasonable response to life's disappointments." The woman settled herself in the chair opposite Eleanor with the air of one accustomed to making herself at home anywhere. "I am Mrs. Agatha Pembroke, recently arrived from London and temporarily residing in this establishment while I search for a suitable house to let." "And you are?" "Eleanor Hartley, recently arrived from Yorkshire, and similarly temporary in my residence." "Ah, a fellow refugee." Mrs. Pembroke's smile was warm and knowing. "Running from something or towards something?" Eleanor found herself answering honestly, perhaps because she was too exhausted for pretense. "I am not entirely certain. Both, perhaps." "The best kind of journey," Mrs. Pembroke declared. "I am running from a nephew who believes I should retire to his country estate and spend my declining years doing needlework. I am running toward a life of my own choosing, which will involve considerably more intellectual stimulation and considerably less needlework." Despite herself, Eleanor smiled. "That sounds like a worthy goal." "It is the only worthy goal, my dear, to live a life of one's own choosing." Mrs. Pembroke leaned forward, her gaze sharpening. "But you have not yet told me what you are running from, or perhaps I should say whom." Eleanor's smile faded. "I am running from my own foolishness, Mrs. Pembroke. I allowed myself to trust a man who proved unworthy of that trust." "Did he hurt you?" "He lied to me, about who he was, about his circumstances, about his intentions." Mrs. Pembroke was quiet for a moment, studying Eleanor's face with an intensity that made her want to look away. "And did he lie about his feelings?" The question struck Eleanor like a physical blow. She had spent 3 days trying not to think about the way Sebastian had looked at her, the warmth in his voice when he spoke her name, the careful attention he had paid to her opinions and her comfort. Had those things been false as well, or had they been real, despite the deception that surrounded them? "I do not know," she whispered. "Then perhaps you owe it to yourself to find out." Mrs. Pembroke rose from her chair with surprising grace. "But first, you must eat something. You look as though you have not had a proper meal in days. Join me for dinner this evening, Miss Hartley. I insist." Eleanor wanted to refuse, to retreat to her small room and nurse her wounds in private. But there was something in Mrs. Pembroke's manner, a combination of authority and kindness, that made refusal impossible. That evening, over a simple but well-prepared meal in the boarding house's dining room, Eleanor found herself telling the entire story. The Duke's arrival in Thornwick, under a false name, their growing friendship, the humiliating revelation at the winter assembly, and her flight from the village. Mrs. Pembroke listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful. When Eleanor finished, she was silent for a long moment before speaking. "You are angry because he deceived you," she said at last. "That is understandable, but I wonder, Miss Hartley, whether you are also angry because his deception forced you to confront something you had been trying to ignore. I do not understand. You are a woman of considerable intelligence and education, yet you have spent 4 years teaching basic letters to farmers' children in a remote village. You are capable of far more, yet you have chosen a life of limitation. Why? Eleanor felt her cheeks flush. "I chose the life that was available to me, Mrs. Pembroke. I'm a woman alone in the world without family or fortune. I took the position that was offered. But was it the only position you could have taken? Or was it the safest?" Mrs. Pembroke's voice was gentle but relentless. "I think, my dear, that you have been hiding in Thornwick just as surely as the Duke was hiding behind his false name. You have been afraid to reach for more, to risk more, because you have already lost so much." The words struck too close to truth for comfort. Eleanor's father had died when she was 22, leaving her with debts she could not pay and a future she could not imagine. She had taken the first position offered to her, grateful for the security it provided, and had never allowed herself to want more. "What would you have me do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I would have you live, Miss Hartley, truly live, not merely survive." Mrs. Pembroke reached across the table and took Eleanor's hand. "I am establishing a school here in Bath, a school for young women of limited means who wish to become governesses or teachers. I need someone to help me develop the curriculum, someone with your experience and your passion for education. The salary would be modest but sufficient, and you would have the opportunity to shape young minds in a more profound way than you could in a village schoolroom." Eleanor stared at her, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You would offer me such a position, but you barely know me. I know enough. I know that you value integrity above comfort, that you have the courage to walk away from a situation that compromises your principles, and that you possess both intelligence and compassion. Those are the qualities I seek in a colleague." Mrs. Pembroke smiled. "Say yes, Miss Hartley. Say yes to a new beginning." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were not tears of grief. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Mrs. Pembroke. I accept your offer with gratitude." Over the following weeks, Eleanor threw herself into her new work with an intensity that surprised even herself. Mrs. Pembroke's school was to be located in a gracious Georgian building near the city centre, with classrooms that caught the morning light and a library that would house hundreds of volumes. Eleanor spent her days planning lessons, interviewing prospective students, and helping to furnish the rooms with everything necessary for learning. She tried not to think about Sebastian. She tried not to wonder where he was, whether he had returned to London, whether he ever thought of her. But late at night, alone in her room, she could not prevent her mind from returning to those weeks in Thornwick, to the sound of his laughter and the warmth of his hand on her arm. Had it all been a lie? Or had there been something real beneath the deception? She was pondering this question one afternoon in early March when Mrs. Pembroke entered the library, where Eleanor was cataloguing new acquisitions. "You have a visitor, my dear," she said, her expression carefully neutral. Eleanor's heart leaped, then settled. It could not be Sebastian. He would have no reason to seek her out, and even if he did, how would he know where to find her? "Who is it?" she asked, setting down her pen. "A gentleman. He gave his name as Dr. Elias Reed. He says he is a colleague of mine from London, though I confess I do not recall the name." Mrs. Pembroke's eyes twinkled. "He is quite insistent on speaking with you, however, something about a mutual interest in educational reform." Curious, despite herself, Eleanor followed Mrs. Pembroke to the small parlour where visitors were received. The man who rose at her entrance was perhaps 35 years old, with auburn hair and keen blue eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He was dressed simply but well, and there was an air of quiet confidence about him that immediately put Eleanor at ease. "Miss Hartley," he said, bowing slightly, "thank you for agreeing to see me. I am Dr. Elias Reed, and I have come from London specifically to meet you." Eleanor glanced at Mrs. Pembroke, who looked as puzzled as she felt. "I am afraid you have me at a disadvantage, Dr. Reed. I cannot imagine why you would wish to meet me." "Because Mrs. Agatha Pembroke has been singing your praises to everyone in our circle," he replied with a warm smile. "She wrote to me about your work here, about your ideas for curriculum development, and your innovative approaches to teaching. I am establishing a teacher training college in London, and I am seeking individuals who share my vision of education as a tool for social advancement. I wondered whether you might be willing to discuss your methods with me." Eleanor felt a flutter of excitement, mixed with apprehension. "I would be honored, Dr. Reed, though I must warn you that my experience is limited to village schools and this new venture with Mrs. Pembroke. Sometimes the freshest perspectives come from those who have not been constrained by traditional methods," he replied. "Shall we sit?" They talked for 2 hours, ranging across topics from pedagogy to philosophy, from the education of women to the responsibilities of those who teach. Dr. Reed listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights drawn from his own extensive experience. Eleanor found herself relaxing in his company, her natural enthusiasm for her subject overcoming her initial reserve. When he finally rose to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Miss Hartley, I wonder whether you would permit me to call on you again. I'm staying in Bath for several weeks, and I would value the opportunity to continue our conversation." Eleanor glanced at Mrs. Pembroke, who nodded encouragingly. "I would be pleased to receive you, Dr. Reed." After he had gone, Mrs. Pembroke settled herself in the chair he had vacated, her expression satisfied. "Well, my dear, it seems you have made quite an impression. He is interested in educational theory. Nothing more," Eleanor protested. "Oh, I think he is interested in rather more than that," Mrs. Pembroke replied with a knowing smile. "But even if his interest is purely professional, it is clear that you have gifts that deserve a wider audience than a village schoolroom. You are beginning to bloom, Eleanor. Do not be afraid of it." That night, as Eleanor prepared for bed, she found herself thinking not of Sebastian, but of the future. For the first time since leaving Thornwick, she felt a spark of genuine hope. Perhaps Mrs. Pembroke was right. Perhaps she had been hiding, choosing safety over possibility. Perhaps it was time to reach for something more. She did not yet know that Sebastian had spent the past 2 months searching for her, or that he was at that very moment, less than 5 miles away, preparing to make one final attempt to win her forgiveness. She did not know that Dr. Reed's interest in her was indeed more than professional, or that she would soon face a choice between the security of the known and the uncertainty of the heart. All she knew, as she extinguished her candle and settled into sleep, was that she felt alive in a way she had not felt in years, and that, for now, was enough. The assembly rooms of Bath were ablaze with candlelight on the evening of the spring charity ball, their elegant proportions and classical columns providing a fitting backdrop for the cream of society. Eleanor stood at the edge of the ballroom, feeling simultaneously conspicuous and invisible in a gown of pale green silk that Mrs. Pembroke had insisted on purchasing for her. "You cannot attend a Bath assembly in your schoolmistress's woolens," Mrs. Pembroke had declared firmly. "You are a woman of intellect and accomplishment, and you must dress accordingly. Consider it an investment in your future." Eleanor had protested, but Mrs. Pembroke had been immovable. Now, wearing the elegant gown with its delicate embroidery and fashionable cut, Eleanor felt like an impostor playing at being a lady. Yet she could not deny the small thrill of pleasure she felt when she caught sight of her reflection in the long mirrors that lined the walls. "You look beautiful," Dr. Reed said quietly at her elbow. He had escorted her to the ball at Mrs. Pembroke's invitation, and he had been attentive without being oppressive, offering his arm, but not demanding her exclusive attention. "You are kind to say so," Eleanor replied, feeling her cheeks warm. "I am truthful to say so. There is a difference." He smiled, and Eleanor found herself smiling back. Over the past 6 weeks, Dr. Reed had become a frequent visitor to the school, ostensibly to discuss educational philosophy, but increasingly to seek Eleanor's company. He had taken her to lectures at the Pump Room, walked with her through the Sydney Gardens, and introduced her to his circle of reformist friends, physicians, educators, and progressive thinkers who welcomed her ideas with genuine interest. Eleanor had not allowed herself to examine too closely what she felt for Dr. Reed. He was intelligent, kind, and respectful. He valued her mind and her opinions. He made no secret of his admiration for her. In every rational way, he was exactly the sort of man she should wish to know better. Yet when she lay awake at night, it was not Dr. Reed's face that haunted her thoughts. "Miss Hartley, there is something I wish to discuss with you," Dr. Reed began, his tone more serious than usual. "Perhaps we might step out onto the terrace?" Before Eleanor could respond, a ripple of interest moved through the crowd near the entrance. Heads turned, voices dropped to whispers, and Eleanor felt a sudden, inexplicable tension in her chest. She turned toward the doorway and felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Sebastian Ashford, Duke of Ashford, stood at the entrance to the ballroom, dressed in impeccable evening clothes that emphasized his height and the breadth of his shoulders. His dark hair was perfectly arranged, his cravat tied with mathematical precision, and his bearing radiated the confidence of a man accustomed to command. He looked every inch the aristocrat, powerful and remote. But his eyes, when they found Eleanor across the crowded room, were neither confident nor remote. They were filled with something that looked remarkably like desperation. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She had not seen him since that terrible night in Thornwick, had not heard from him despite half hoping, half dreading that he might write. Now here he was, in Bath, at this assembly, looking at her as though she were the only person in the room. "Eleanor," Dr. Reed said quietly, following her gaze. "Is that the Duke of Ashford?" she confirmed, her voice barely audible. "Yes." Sebastian began to move through the crowd, which parted before him with the automatic deference accorded to rank and wealth. Eleanor felt frozen, unable to flee, unable to advance, caught between the desire to run toward him and the equally strong desire to run away. He stopped a few feet from her and bowed with perfect formality. "Miss Hartley, Dr. Reed." His voice was carefully controlled, but Eleanor could hear the tension beneath it. "I hope I am not intruding." "Your Grace," Eleanor managed, dropping into a curtsy that felt awkward and insufficient. "This is unexpected. I have been searching for you," Sebastian said simply, "for weeks. When I finally learned you were in Bath, I knew I had to come, had to speak with you. I know I have no right to ask for your time, but I am asking nonetheless." Dr. Reed stepped forward slightly, his posture protective. "Miss Hartley is under no obligation to speak with you, Your Grace. If your presence is unwelcome—" "It is all right, Dr. Reed," Eleanor interrupted, though her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might escape her chest. "I will hear what His Grace has to say." Sebastian's expression flickered with relief and gratitude. "Thank you. Might we speak privately, just for a few moments?" Eleanor glanced at Dr. Reed, who looked concerned but nodded reluctantly. "I shall be nearby if you need me," he said quietly. She allowed Sebastian to lead her through the French doors onto the terrace, where the cool night air provided welcome relief from the heat of the ballroom. The terrace overlooked the gardens, now shadowy in the moonlight, and the sounds of music and conversation faded to a distant murmur. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Sebastian stood with his back to the balustrade, his hands clasped behind him, his expression tormented. Eleanor waited, her own emotions a chaotic tangle of anger, longing, and confusion. "I do not know where to begin," he said at last. "I have rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times, and now that you are here before me, every word I planned seems inadequate." "Then perhaps you should simply tell me the truth," Eleanor replied, proud that her voice remained steady. "That would be a refreshing change." He flinched as though she had struck him. "You have every right to your anger, Eleanor. Every right to despise me. I lied to you about my identity, about my circumstances. I deceived you and everyone in Thornwick. There is no excuse for my behavior, only an explanation." "Then explain." Sebastian drew a deep breath, and when he spoke, his words came in a rush, as though he feared he might lose his courage if he paused. "I came to Thornwick because I was suffocating in London. Every woman I met saw only my title and my fortune. Every conversation was calculated, every smile rehearsed. I wanted to know if anyone could see me, Sebastian, not the Duke, and value what they found. I wanted to discover who I was when stripped of all the trappings of my rank. He turned to face her fully, his grey eyes intense in the moonlight. And then I met you. You, who challenged my opinions and questioned my assumptions. You, who cared nothing for wealth or status, but everything for truth and integrity. You, who made me feel more alive in a few weeks than I had felt in years of London seasons. So I was an experiment, Eleanor asked, her voice sharp with pain. A test to see if a poor schoolmistress could be deceived by a duke playing at being ordinary. No! The word burst from him with vehement force. You were never an experiment, Eleanor. You were a revelation. Every moment I spent with you was real. Every conversation, every laugh, every look, all of it was real. The only thing that was false was my name. Names matter, Your Grace. They define who we are, where we belong in the world. You cannot simply set aside your identity like a coat you no longer wish to wear. Can I not? He moved closer, though he did not touch her. Is the Duke of Ashford so different from Sebastian Thorne? Are they not the same man, with the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same capacity to love? The word hung between them, stark and undeniable. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. Do not speak to me of love, she whispered. You do not know what that word means. Then let me show you. Sebastian's voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. Give me a chance to prove that what I feel for you is real. Not as a duke seeking a duchess, not as a nobleman condescending to notice a woman beneath his station, but as a man who has found the one person in the world who makes him want to be better than he is. Before Eleanor could respond, the French doors opened, and Lady Beatrice Thornton swept onto the terrace, resplendent in a gown of crimson silk that seemed to glow in the moonlight. Her expression was one of cold triumph. How touching, she drawled. The Duke and the schoolmistress reunited at last. I do hope I am not interrupting anything important. Sebastian's jaw tightened. Lady Beatrice, your talent for appearing at inopportune moments remains undiminished. I heard you were in Bath, Sebastian, and I simply had to come and see for myself whether the rumors were true. They said you were pursuing a woman of no consequence, a mere teacher. I confess I did not believe it until this moment. She turned her cold gaze on Eleanor. Tell me, Miss Hartley, do you truly believe that a duke would marry someone like you? A woman without family, without fortune, without even a respectable background. Eleanor lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed. I have never presumed to think about marriage to His Grace, Lady Beatrice. Unlike some, I do not measure my worth by the rank of the men who notice me. Lady Beatrice's eyes flashed with anger. How dare you? How dare I speak the truth? Eleanor's voice was steady now, strengthened by righteous anger. You are correct, that I have no fortune and no family, but I have my integrity, my education, and my ability to earn my own living. I am beholden to no one, dependent on no one. Can you say the same, Lady Beatrice? Or are you so desperate to become a duchess that you would pursue a man who has made it abundantly clear that he does not want you? The silence that followed was absolute. Lady Beatrice's face had gone white, then red, and for a moment Eleanor thought she might actually strike her. But then Dr. Reed appeared in the doorway, his expression concerned. Miss Hartley, is everything all right? His presence seemed to break the spell. Lady Beatrice drew herself up, her expression smoothing into one of icy disdain. I see you have found a more suitable admirer, Miss Hartley. A mere doctor, but at least he is closer to your own station. I wish you joy of each other. She swept back into the ballroom, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and palpable hostility. Dr. Reed approached Eleanor, his eyes searching her face. Are you hurt? No, I am well. Thank you for your concern. He glanced at Sebastian, then back at Eleanor, and something in his expression shifted, a look of understanding mixed with resignation. I think, Miss Hartley, that you and His Grace have matters to discuss that do not require my presence. I shall wait for you inside. After he had gone, Eleanor and Sebastian stood in silence once more. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her voice soft but firm. "You say you love me, your grace, but love is not enough. There is a gulf between us that cannot be bridged by feeling alone. You are a duke, I am a schoolmistress. Your world and mine are as different as day and night. Then let us create a new world," Sebastian said urgently, "one where such distinctions do not matter. Eleanor, I am not asking you to become someone you are not. I am asking you to let me become someone better than I have been. With you beside me, I could use my position and my wealth to make a real difference. We could establish schools, support education reform, give opportunities to those who have been denied them. Together, we could do so much good." Eleanor felt her resolve wavering. The vision he painted was seductive, not the glitter of society, but the possibility of purpose, of using privilege for meaningful change. "And what of your family, your peers?" she asked. "They would never accept me. I do not care what they accept, I care only what you accept. Eleanor Hartley, I am asking you, begging you to give me another chance. Not as the Duke of Ashford, but as Sebastian. Simply Sebastian, who loves you more than he thought it possible to love anyone." Eleanor looked into his eyes and saw the truth there, raw and undeniable. He meant every word, and despite everything, the deception, the hurt, the vast gulf between their stations, she realized that she loved him too. Had loved him from those first conversations in Thornwick, when he had been simply Mr. Thorne and she had been simply herself. But love, she had learned, was not always enough. "I need time," she said at last. "Time to think, to understand what this would mean. I will not give you an answer tonight, your grace, but I will not refuse to see you again. Is that sufficient?" Sebastian's face lit with hope so profound it made her chest ache. "It is more than I dared hope for. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you for not closing the door entirely." He took her hand and raised it to his lips, a gesture so tender and reverent that Eleanor felt tears finally spill over. Then he released her and stepped back, bowing formally before returning to the ballroom. Eleanor remained on the terrace, her hand still tingling from his kiss, her mind whirling with possibilities and fears. Dr. Reed appeared beside her a moment later, offering his arm without a word. "You love him," he said quietly as they walked back inside. "It was not a question." "I do not know what I feel," Eleanor replied honestly. "Yes, you do, and that is all right, Miss Hartley. Love is not always convenient or rational, but it is always worth pursuing if it is real." He smiled, though there was sadness in his eyes. "I had hoped that you and I might, but I see now that your heart was never free to give. I wish you happiness, wherever you find it. Doctor Reed, I'm so sorry. Do not be. You have given me your friendship and your intellectual companionship, and those are gifts I shall treasure. But do not let fear prevent you from accepting what that man is offering you. He may be a duke, but he is also a man who loves you. That is rarer than any title." As Eleanor made her way home that night, her mind was a tumult of conflicting emotions. But beneath the confusion, beneath the fear and the doubt, there was a small, persistent voice that whispered a single word: hope. Spring advanced into early summer, and Bath bloomed with roses and possibility. Sebastian remained in the city, taking rooms at the Royal Crescent and conducting what he called his campaign of patient devotion. He did not press Eleanor for an answer to his unspoken proposal, but he made his presence felt in ways both grand and subtle. He donated a substantial sum to Mrs. Pembroke's school, enough to ensure its success for years to come. He attended lectures on educational reform and contributed thoughtfully to the discussions, demonstrating a genuine interest in the subject that went beyond mere courtship. He sent Eleanor books he thought she might enjoy, always with a note that was respectful rather than presumptuous. And twice a week he called at the school and asked if she might walk with him through the gardens. Eleanor found herself looking forward to these walks with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. Their conversations ranged across every subject imaginable, from politics to poetry, from philosophy to the practical challenges of managing large estates. Sebastian spoke to her as an equal, valuing her opinions and challenging her assumptions in ways that made her think more deeply about her own beliefs. "You would make an excellent duchess," Mrs. Pembroke observed one afternoon, as she and Eleanor reviewed applications from prospective students. "You have the intelligence, the grace, and the strength of character required for such a position." Eleanor set down her pen and looked at her mentor with exasperation. "You are not subtle, Mrs. Pembroke. I have never seen the value in subtlety when directness will serve." Mrs. Pembroke smiled. "You love him, Eleanor, and he quite clearly loves you. What is preventing you from accepting what he is offering?" "Fear," Eleanor admitted quietly. "Fear that I will lose myself in his world. Fear that I will become merely an ornament, a curiosity, the schoolmistress who became a duchess. Fear that what we have now, in these stolen hours of conversation and companionship, will be destroyed by the reality of his life." "Those are reasonable fears," Mrs. Pembroke acknowledged. "But consider this. What do you fear more? The possibility of losing yourself in his world, or the certainty of losing him by refusing to try?" The question haunted Eleanor for days. She thought about it as she taught her classes, as she walked through the gardens, as she lay awake at night listening to the sounds of the city. What did she fear more? The answer came to her one evening in late June, when Sebastian arrived at the school with an unusual request. "I must return to London tomorrow," he said as they walked through the twilight gardens. "There are matters of business I can no longer postpone, but before I go, I would like to show you something. Will you come with me?" Eleanor agreed, curious despite her apprehension. Sebastian handed her into his carriage, and they drove through the darkening streets to the outskirts of Bath, where a large estate stood on a hill overlooking the city. The house was handsome, but not ostentatious, built of honey-coloured stone with extensive gardens and a view that took Eleanor's breath away. "What is this place?" she asked, as Sebastian helped her down from the carriage. "It is called Hartwell House. It belonged to a distant cousin who died recently without heirs. The property has come to me, and I have been considering what to do with it." He led her up the steps to the front door, which opened at his touch. "I thought you might help me decide." The interior was spacious and light-filled, with high ceilings and elegant proportions. But what caught Eleanor's attention was not the architecture, but the potential she saw in every room. The large drawing room could be converted into classrooms. The library could house thousands of books. The extensive grounds could provide space for gardens and outdoor learning. "You are thinking of making this into a school," she said, understanding dawning. "I am thinking of making this into whatever you wish it to be," Sebastian replied. "A school, a teacher training college, a center for educational research. Whatever your vision requires, I am offering you the resources to pursue your passion, Eleanor. Not as a bribe or a condition of marriage, but as a gift freely given, regardless of your answer to my other question." Eleanor turned to face him, her heart pounding. "What question is that, Your Grace?" Sebastian took both her hands in his expression more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "Eleanor Hartley, I am asking you to marry me, not because I need a duchess, but because I need you. I am asking you to share my life, my work, my hopes and fears. I'm asking you to help me become the man I wish to be, a man who uses his privilege for good, who values substance over show, who measures success by the difference he makes rather than the power he wields." He paused, his grey eyes searching hers. "I know the obstacles. I know that society will whisper and gossip. I know that my family will object, and that there will be difficulties I cannot foresee. But I also know that I love you with every fibre of my being, and that I would rather face those difficulties with you than live in comfort without you. So I am asking, Eleanor, will you marry me?" Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in months, they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Sebastian. I will marry you." The kiss that followed was tender and passionate in equal measure, a promise of all that was to come. When they finally drew apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I have something for you," Sebastian said, reaching into his pocket. He drew out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a ring, not the ostentatious diamond she might have expected, but a simple band of gold set with a single emerald. "This was my mother's ring. She was a woman of great intelligence and compassion, much like you. I think she would have been pleased to see you wear it." Eleanor held out her hand, and Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. "When shall we marry?" she asked, practical even in the midst of emotion. "As soon as you wish. Tomorrow, if you would have me. Or we can wait, if you need time to prepare." "I would like to marry quietly," Eleanor said thoughtfully, "without fuss or spectacle. Perhaps here in Bath with Mrs. Pembroke and a few friends to witness." "So, whatever you wish," Sebastian agreed. "Though I warn you, once we return to London, there will be no avoiding society's attention. Are you prepared for that?" Eleanor thought of Lady Beatrice's contempt, of the whispers and stares she would inevitably face, but she also thought of the work they could do together, the schools they could establish, the lives they could change. "I am prepared," she said firmly, "as long as I have you beside me." They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at Bath Abbey, with Mrs. Pembroke, Dr. Reed, and a handful of close friends in attendance. Eleanor wore a simple gown of ivory silk, and Sebastian looked at her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. The wedding breakfast was held at Hartwell House, which Eleanor had already begun to transform into the school of her dreams. As she stood with Sebastian's arm around her waist, looking out over the gardens, where students would soon walk and learn, she felt a profound sense of rightness. "Are you happy?" Sebastian asked quietly. "I am terrified and exhilarated in equal measure," Eleanor replied honestly. "But yes, I am happy, more happy than I ever thought possible. Then I am content." The journey to London the following week was both exciting and daunting. Eleanor watched the countryside roll past the carriage windows and tried to prepare herself for the life that awaited her. She would be the Duchess of Ashford, mistress of great houses and hostess to the powerful. But she would also be Eleanor, teacher and reformer, a woman with her own purpose and her own voice. Their arrival in London created exactly the sensation Sebastian had predicted. The news that the Duke of Ashford had married a schoolmistress spread through society like wildfire, generating shock, speculation, and no small amount of scandal. Eleanor endured the stares and whispers with as much grace as she could muster, supported by Sebastian's unwavering presence at her side. Lady Beatrice, predictably, was among the most vocal critics. She made pointed remarks about Eleanor's unsuitability at every opportunity, and her mother, the Countess of Westmere, refused to acknowledge the marriage at all. But there were also unexpected allies. Several progressive members of the aristocracy, impressed by Eleanor's intelligence and Sebastian's commitment to reform, welcomed them warmly. Mrs. Pembroke came to London for an extended visit, providing both moral support and practical advice on navigating society's treacherous waters. And gradually, as summer turned to autumn, Eleanor began to find her footing. She established a pattern of dividing her time between her duties as Duchess and her work in education. She hosted salons that brought together reformers and aristocrats, creating conversations that might never have happened otherwise. She used her new position to advocate for causes she believed in, and she discovered that a duchess's voice carried considerable weight. One evening in October, Sebastian found her in the library of their London townhouse, surrounded by papers and plans for a new school in the East End. "You are working too hard," he observed, settling into the chair beside her. "There is so much to do," Eleanor replied, but she set down her pen and leaned against him. "Sometimes I still cannot quite believe this is my life. Do you regret it?" "Never." She turned to look at him, her expression serious. There are moments when I miss the simplicity of my old life, when I feel overwhelmed by the expectations and the scrutiny. But I would not trade what we have for anything. You have given me the freedom to pursue my passions and the resources to make a real difference. How could I regret that? Sebastian kissed her forehead tenderly. You have given me far more. You have given me purpose and meaning. You have taught me that privilege is not a right, but a responsibility. You have made me want to be worthy of you. You already are, Eleanor said softly. You always were. You just needed someone to help you see it. As they sat together in the quiet library, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been rejected and humiliated, had fled in pain and anger, but that rejection had led her to Bath, to Mrs. Pembroke, to a new understanding of her own worth and potential. And ultimately, it had led her back to Sebastian, not as the Duke of Ashford, but as the man she loved. Sometimes, she thought, the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most painful packages. Sometimes, what looks like an ending is actually a beginning. And sometimes, a lonely duke in disguise and a kind governess can change everything. 18 months after their wedding, Eleanor stood in the entrance hall of Hartwell House, now officially the Hartwell Academy for Young Women, and surveyed the scene before her with deep satisfaction. The house that had once stood empty and purposeless now rang with the voices of 60 students, young women from modest backgrounds who were being trained as governesses and teachers. The transformation had been remarkable. The drawing room had indeed become a series of classrooms, each equipped with desks, blackboards, and extensive libraries. The former ballroom now served as a lecture hall, where visiting scholars presented on subjects ranging from mathematics to modern languages. The gardens had been developed into outdoor learning spaces, with areas for scientific observation, artistic study, and quiet contemplation. But the most significant transformation had been in the students themselves. Eleanor watched as they moved through the halls, with confidence and purpose, their faces alight with the joy of learning. These were young women who had been told their ambitions were impossible, their dreams too grand for their stations. Now they were being given the tools and the encouragement to reach beyond the limitations society had placed upon them. "It is magnificent, is it not?" Mrs. Pembroke said, appearing at Eleanor's elbow. She had accepted the position of head mistress at Hartwell Academy, bringing her considerable experience and formidable will to bear on the project. "When I think of what this place was 18 months ago and what it has become, it is beyond what I imagined," Eleanor agreed, "and we have only just begun. Sebastian has secured funding for 3 more schools, one in Manchester, one in Birmingham, and one in Edinburgh. Each will follow the Hartwell model, providing education and opportunity to young women who would otherwise have none. The Duke has proven himself a true reformer," Mrs. Pembroke observed. "Though I confess I had my doubts when you first told me you were marrying him. I worried that you would be swallowed up by his world, that your own work would be forgotten in the demands of being a duchess." "I had the same fears," Eleanor admitted. "But Sebastian has been true to his word. He has used his position and his resources to amplify my work rather than diminish it. And I, in turn, have learned to use my position as Duchess to open doors that would have remained closed to Eleanor Hartley, schoolmistress." It had not been easy. The first year of their marriage had been marked by challenges both expected and unforeseen. Society's initial shock had given way to grudging acceptance in some quarters and continued hostility in others. Lady Beatrice had married a wealthy but dull baron and continued to make cutting remarks whenever their paths crossed. The Countess of Westmere had gone to her grave without acknowledging Eleanor's existence. But there had also been triumphs. Eleanor's first public speech on educational reform had been reported in the newspapers, generating both praise and controversy. Her salons had become known as places where genuine intellectual discourse occurred, attracting not just reformers, but also politicians and influential thinkers. And gradually, other aristocratic women had begun to follow her example, using their positions to advocate for causes they believed in. Sebastian had been her constant support and partner. He had learned to navigate the world of educational reform with the same skill he brought to managing his estates, and he had proven himself willing to challenge his own class when necessary. Together, they had become a formidable team, their different strengths complementing each other perfectly. "Your Grace, there is someone here to see you," one of the students announced, appearing in the doorway with a curtsy. Eleanor followed the girl to the small parlor reserved for visitors and found Dr. Elias Reed waiting, his face wreathed in smiles. "Dr. Reed," Eleanor exclaimed, genuinely pleased. "What brings you to Bath?" "I have come to see the famous Hartwell Academy for myself," he replied, taking her offered hand. "And to bring you news. The London Teacher Training College has received royal patronage. Her Majesty has expressed particular interest in our work, and she has requested a meeting with the founders of the educational reform movement." He paused significantly. "That includes you, Your Grace." Eleanor felt a thrill of excitement mixed with trepidation. "The Queen wishes to meet with me?" "She wishes to meet with the Duchess of Ashford, who was once a schoolmistress, and who has used her position to advocate for the education of women. You have become something of a symbol, Eleanor, a proof that intelligence and determination can overcome the barriers of birth and circumstance." After Dr. Reed had departed, Eleanor walked through the Academy's gardens, her mind whirling with the implications of his news. She had never sought to be a symbol or a public figure. She had simply wanted to teach, to make a difference in whatever way she could. But she could not deny that her position as Duchess had given her a platform she could never have achieved as Miss Hartley, schoolmistress. She found Sebastian in the library, reviewing architectural plans for the Manchester school. He looked up as she entered, his face lighting with the smile that still made her heart skip. "You look troubled," he observed, setting aside his papers. "What has happened?" Eleanor told him about Dr. Reed's visit and the Queen's request. "I am not certain I am ready for such attention," she confessed. "What if I say something inappropriate? What if I embarrass you?" Sebastian rose and came to her, taking her hands in his. "You could never embarrass me, Eleanor. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever known, and I am honored to be your husband. As for the Queen, she is a woman of considerable intelligence herself. She will appreciate your honesty and your passion. Simply be yourself, and you will be magnificent." "How did I become so fortunate as to find you?" Eleanor asked softly. "I think we found each other," Sebastian replied. "Or perhaps we were always meant to find each other, and it simply took a disguise and a rejection to bring us to the place where we could recognize what we had." That evening, they hosted a small dinner at Hartwell House for the Academy's supporters and benefactors. As Eleanor moved among the guests, she caught sight of her reflection in one of the long mirrors that lined the dining room. She saw a woman in an elegant gown of deep blue silk, her hair dressed fashionably, a duchess's pearls at her throat. But she also saw the schoolmistress she had been, the woman who had valued knowledge and integrity above all else. She had not lost herself in Sebastian's world. Instead, she had expanded her world to include his, creating something new and powerful from the combination. After the guests had departed, Sebastian and Eleanor stood together on the terrace, looking out over the moonlit gardens where their students would walk tomorrow. "I received a letter today," Sebastian said quietly, "from Lady Beatrice." Eleanor tensed. What did she want? To apologize, surprisingly. She wrote that she has come to understand that her pursuit of me was never about love, but about ambition and wounded pride. She said that seeing what we have built together has made her realize what true partnership looks like. He paused. She also asked if there might be a position available at one of our schools. She wishes to do something meaningful with her life. Eleanor was silent for a moment, processing this unexpected development. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her that the decision was yours to make. You are the director of the educational program. If you believe she is sincere, and if you think she could contribute meaningfully to our work, then I will support your decision." Eleanor thought about the woman who had humiliated her in Thornwick, who had sneered at her aspirations and mocked her presumption. But she also thought about the power of transformation, about the possibility that even the most unlikely people could change and grow. "I will meet with her," Eleanor decided. "I will assess her sincerity and her commitment. If she is truly willing to work and to learn, then perhaps there is a place for her in what we are building. After all, our mission is to provide opportunities for women to become more than society expects them to be. Should we not extend that opportunity to everyone, even those who have wronged us?" Sebastian pulled her close, his arms warm and strong around her. "You are a better person than I am, Eleanor Ashford." "No," she replied, resting her head against his chest. "I am simply a person who has been given extraordinary opportunities and who wishes to extend those opportunities to others. You taught me that privilege is a responsibility, Sebastian. Now I am simply living according to that principle." As they stood together under the stars, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been rejected by a duke in disguise, had fled in pain and humiliation, had rebuilt her life from nothing. And in doing so, she had discovered her own strength, her own purpose, her own capacity for love and forgiveness. The rejection that had seemed like an ending had been a beginning. The humiliation that had felt like destruction had been transformation. And the man who had hurt her had become the partner who helped her flourish. She thought of the students sleeping in the rooms above, young women who would wake tomorrow to another day of learning and growing. She thought of the schools they would establish, the lives they would touch, the changes they would make in a world that desperately needed changing. "Are you happy?" Sebastian asked, echoing the question he had posed on their wedding day. Eleanor smiled, her heart full to overflowing. "I am more than happy. I am fulfilled. I am purposeful. I am exactly where I am meant to be, doing exactly what I am meant to do, with exactly the person I am meant to be with." Then I am content," Sebastian replied, as he had that day. "More than content. I am blessed beyond measure." They remained on the terrace long into the night, talking of their plans and their dreams, of the work that lay ahead and the life they would build together. And when they finally retired to their rooms, it was with the deep satisfaction of two people who had found not just love, but purpose, not just partnership, but meaning. The lonely duke, who had disguised himself to find authenticity, had found far more than he had sought, and the kind governess who had been rejected and humiliated had discovered that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most painful packages. Together, they had changed everything, and they were only just beginning. If you've been listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you're listening. I want to know how far this story has traveled.